Well, there are at least three different things I want to talk about. They may or may not be related. I'm going to screen share here. And first, we'll look at the Psalm. Now, some of you may recognize this. The psalmist is addressing someone who is righteous. If you say, "The Lord is my refuge," and you make the Most High your dwelling, no harm will overtake you. No disaster will come near your tent. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. The serpent himself, the devil, tempts Christ with this in the wilderness. He quotes the Psalm because the devil knows the Bible a lot better than we do, and he's not afraid to use it for our own undoing. Remember, he tells Jesus, "Jump off the parapet, jump off the building. If you are the Son of God, it is written that he will protect you. He will not allow you to dash your foot against a stone, to stub your toe. If God will not allow you to stub your toe, jump off the building and he'll save you." And Jesus says, "You shall not tempt the Lord your God." So anyway, that should have been familiar to you. When we look at wisdom, this is very interesting. So the author continues to talk about idolatry and how you can take a piece of wood and form it into an idol. But then he talks about a piece of wood that saved us. He talks about how a wooden boat can sail across the seas, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. But the shipwright has been given the wisdom by God to build such a craft. And then he says, "For of old, when the proud giants were being destroyed," and remember, earlier in Genesis, we have the stories of the giants who die out before history really gets going. But he has earlier been referring to all of these historical events, mostly in Genesis, in fact, entirely in Genesis and Exodus. So he's referring back to this. "For of old, when the proud giants were being destroyed, the hope of the universe, who took refuge on a raft, left to the world a future for the human family under the guidance of your hand." What's he talking about? He means Noah. Noah was the hope of the universe. He took refuge on a raft, the ark. And then he left to the world a future for the human family under the guidance of God's hand during the flood. So the ark, built of wood, the same wood that can be used to make idols, was a vessel of salvation for the human race. And he points this out by saying, "For blessed is the wood through which righteousness comes about." Now, the church fathers and many since have said, this is a prophecy of the cross. For blessed is the wood through which righteousness comes about. But the handmade idol is accursed, and its maker as well. The same wood that can be used to save us can be used to damn us. Now, the author of the Book of Wisdom, whether it's Solomon or someone else, is probably not envisioning this. He's simply talking about the original wood that saved us, the wood of the Ark of Noah. He doesn't know that he is also prophesying, prefiguring, pointing toward, foreshadowing the wood that will indeed save all of us. So that in many ways, the church has been talked of as the ark that we sail to our salvation. Now, I want to look at St. Paul, and then maybe we'll finish again with wisdom. St. Paul talks about this. Now, he's talking about the law versus faith, and we will get into that more. I got into that last semester when we were in the book of Romans. So I don't want to focus on that yet because Paul makes it very simple. eventually in Galatians, I want to point out this. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree. And the footnote there shows you that's from Deuteronomy 21:23. He's referring to something in the law of Moses when he talks about Christ becomes the curse for us. Since we on our own powers and by our own initiative can't save ourselves or even do good for any length of time by our own efforts, we are all cursed. Christ takes that curse upon himself and in a sense becomes that curse when he is nailed upon a tree and is lifted up and revealed to be the curse of mankind for many. Now that's deep and it's hard to get into that in a video, but I did want to go back at least for a second and finish up with wisdom. Because by the end of this chapter, the author is talking about what happens. He is saying not only can a man form an idol out of a piece of wood that's just a piece of trash and then worship that idol, dead though it is, he also implies that the wood which has no eyes or no ears, we become like that wood. We become what we worship. We have eyes, but we do not see, and ears, but we do not hear. And we have hearts of stone when we worship gods of stone. But it's worse than that. Because let's say, he says, someone fashions an idol that is the image of the king, the ruler, the high priest, whatever. And people not only worship that idol as a god, they begin to worship the human being it represents as a god. And we start going from bad to worse. He also refers to the worst of pagan religions. For while they practice either child sacrifices or occult mysteries or frenzied carousing and exotic rites, they no longer respect either lives or purity of marriage, but they either waylay and kill each other or aggrieve each other by adultery, and all is confusion, blood and murder, theft and guile, corruption, faithlessness, turmoil, perjury, disturbance of good people, neglect of gratitude, besmirching of souls, unnatural lust, meaning sexual perversion, disorder in marriage, adultery, and shamelessness. For the worship of infamous idols is the reason and source and extreme of all evil. Don't believe it when the new pagans tell you, well, I worship Maya, or I worship, fill in the blank. I practice Kwanzaa, which is entirely made up. It's an entirely artificial holiday, but I love the pagan gods that connect me to the earth. What you get is what you get in the play The Bacchae, the ancient Greek tragedy, in which someone is torn literally limb from limb by the frenzied practitioners of the rite, these women who are devoted to Bacchus. And then on stage, you get to see dismembered body parts and a lot of blood, which is pretty cool. But it teaches the lesson that people aren't playing around. You might think you're playing around like you do with Ouija boards and stuff. You might think, oh, I know that this block of wood isn't really a god, but I'm going to worship it, and you never know. I really love this healing crystal. You never really know. It's probably a sham or a fraud, but you never know. Well, you become what you worship. And we are trying to worship and pattern our lives after that which is true, beautiful, and good. And it's different in the Christian faith than it is anywhere else. We still have Christians who commit adultery and who murder and who give themselves over to all these sins. But when they do, they are a witness against themselves because that's not what they're supposed to do. Whereas in these pagan rituals, human sacrifice, child sacrifice, frenzied rituals, this is all par for the course. So that the dishonor of worshiping a fake god, a god of your own making, which you know is of your own making, opens the door to all sorts of demonic activity. Okay, more tomorrow, God willing.